Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a Playoff Monday edition of the Valentine's Views podcast, your first Valentine's Views podcast of 2023. And of course, we are celebrating today after your New York Giants routed Indianapolis on Sunday, qualifying for the playoffs for the first time since 2016. Those of you watching us on YouTube, you can already see the smile on Tony DelGenio's face that he just can't hide it. So Tony, good morning. How are you? And happy playoff Monday to you.
Well, it certainly is a good morning. Yeah, happy playoff Monday to you too. That couldn't have been more satisfying yesterday than what we got. Everything was pretty much perfect. Giants finally ran away with a victory against an opponent that they should have beaten handily, and they got to do it at home in front of the home crowd, which I think really deserves it after all the years of suffering.
Did it? I was sitting in the stadium, and the one unfortunate thing about the press box is it's in the north. Obviously New Jersey's in the Northeast, and it's cold, and it's not a domed stadium. In Minnesota, I guess the press box is actually open air where you're actually you can feel like part of the crowd, but you're behind, you're indoors, you're behind glass, you're basically, you can tell that the crowd is loud, but you can't really feel it per se because you're because you're inside. But did it come through on television just how electric that crowd was yesterday?
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, the only other game that it reminded me of this season was the Baltimore game, where I thought that the fans really made noise for the Giants. This seemed to me comparable to that game.
Well, the Giants pulled out all the stops. They brought out Lawrence Taylor to ring the bell at the start of the game.
He was having the ball doing it too.
And they not only brought him out, they ran him out of the tunnel to get an ovation. And it's funny because Patty Traina of Giants country and I, kind of turned to each other and thought, he's probably still the best linebacker the Giants have. even at, what is he, 60 years old or something like that? Put him out there. He's probably still their best linebacker.
But Landon Collins played pretty well yesterday, so
yes, he did. Yes,
if we're gonna call him a linebacker.
Yeah, I think we have to call him a linebacker hybrid, whatever he is. He did play pretty well, and it was interesting and nice to see Collins make a play. But from my perspective, it was. We'll just start with this. I think everybody felt like the Giants should win that game, and had no real excuse not to win that game. For me, it was nice to see the Giants do what they were supposed to do and leave no doubt about it. Basically the game was over at halftime. I mean, Darius Slayton tried to make a little bit of a game of it in the third quarter, but it was nice to see the Giants just pretty much from beginning to end do to the Colts what they were supposed to do to the Colts and leave no doubt, about getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, and the thing about this season, as satisfying as the season as a whole has been, is that the Giants up to this point hadn't won a game by more than 8 points, not even against Houston, right? Which was a game that I thought they might run away with, and they never quite managed to run away with it. And so, yeah, it's nice for a change to see them get the job done when they're supposed to get the job done, and you can say that it's not as fulfilling as big victories like they've had sprinkled throughout the course of the season over seemingly superior teams. But as you say, taking care of business against an opponent that you're supposed to beat and doing it when everything is on the line, there's something to be said for that. And good teams have to be able to do that. And the Giants are not a dominating team. I mean, even yesterday, Indianapolis came out and traded punches with them early in the game. And actually, if I remember correctly, Indianapolis took a 3-0 lead, in fact, in the game. And it really wasn't until the second quarter that the Giants got going. But to me, that's a heartening thing too, because to me, one of the consistent signatures of this coaching staff, I feel, is that they see what the other team is doing and they adjust to it, and they figure out how to stop it, how to attack it on the other side of the ball. And so they make adjustments in the game that make things better. And I thought yesterday was a good example of that too. And overall, there's nothing to complain about on a morning like this after seeing them do this yesterday.
Absolutely not. And we have to get into talking about Daniel Jones, and anyone who read Big Blue View on Sunday evening, read my column about Jones and read the things that Brian Daboll said about Jones, that the players said about Jones. And I think for me, I'll say this. I think that there's no doubt in my mind that the Giants need to bring Daniel Jones back in 2023 and beyond. For me, there's also no doubt that when Daniel Jones looks at this situation, I think he will understand that Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka, this situation is the best one he's ever been in. And I don't know why he would have any desire to move on from it. Now, is he ever going to be prime Tom Brady, prime Aaron Rodgers? Probably not. But for me, the way I look at it, when you look at what Daniel Jones did Sunday, what he's done this year, it's impossible not to feel good for him. And whether you're a Daniel Jones supporter or not, I think you have to give the man his respect for the toughness that he shows, for the leadership that he shows, and for what he has done for this football team. He's a good NFL quarterback.
Oh, I agree completely. And I think that there's something kind of interesting that affects the perception of him, and that is that he's not the type of quarterback, the quarterback ideal that football fans have come to expect in the 21st century. I mean, first with Brady, and then with Rodgers and a few other guys, and obviously in recent years with people like Mahomes and Allen and Justin Herbert and so on and so forth. There was this a classic movie back in the 1960s, one of my favorites, a Peter Sellers movie called Dr. Strangelove, and it had a subtitle that was "How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb." And well, Jones is sort of the exact opposite of that. He's not someone, at least in this offense, with this offensive line and with this set of wide receivers, who throws the bomb very much, but he's a different type of quarterback in a different type of offense that is becoming very effective in that type of offense, this short passing type of offense. And if you look at some of the numbers out there, Jones had a 96.9 total quarterback rating, QBR, yesterday. That's 96.9 out of 100 possible. So according to ESPN's metric for quarterbacks, he was almost perfect yesterday, higher than anyone else in the NFL. And I read somewhere, although I didn't check this, might have been the highest QBR score of the entire season for Jones. Yet when you look at the typical kind of volume-based passing metrics, touchdown passes, yards, and so on and so forth, he's down, number 15 to 20 or something like that. He just broke 3,000 yards a week ago or something like that. And, other guys like Mahomes pass for a mile already, and it's, and so on. Right. But I think what's happened is that whether this is what Daboll wants to do or whether it's just Daboll and Kafka saying, this is the quarterback we have, how do we get the most out of him? They've just designed an offense that makes use of his skill in the short game and rolling out and so on, and makes use of his legs for added value. And although it's not the formula that people say you have to have in the NFL today, this whole expected points added per play metric that's supposedly used to define the great quarterbacks is all about the idea that explosive plays, a small number of explosive plays is the best way to score a lot of points, whereas a large number of small plays that get you yards is a less efficient way to do it because you have more opportunity for error. Well, the Giants are making that short passing game work with Jones, and it turns out that he seems to be really, really good at it. And you throw that in with his legs and what he's able to do, and I think once you get used to that type of quarterback, you have to say he could be pretty darn effective in the NFL.
And it was interesting last night. I had the opportunity to be in the locker room, and we talked to a lot of the players about Jones, and the respect that they have for him is apparent. Just and like I said earlier, you have to respect. Maybe you cringe at it sometimes when your quarterback is throwing stiff arms at linebackers and throwing shoulders into linebackers, but
Well,
and even
Cherokee one of those.
yes, he did. But even Andrew Thomas said last night after the game, he said, "I told him, would you just get down? Would you just get down?" And Darius Slayton was like, it makes me cringe to watch him take those hits. He said, but Slayton was like, I wanted to be one of those people up in the crowd chanting Daniel Jones's name at the end of the game, and they have a lot of respect for him, and whatever his ceiling might be in terms of, talent wise and numbers wise and all of that, I just think you have to recognize how important he's been, and the fact that in the end, I don't know why, other than Daniel Jones asking for, 5 years and $400 million, I don't know why the Giants would look at their quarterback situation and think that he's not the right answer as far as the guy for them to go forward with at this point. And I hate to mention it, but I remember a former GM saying that he would like to just, when he retired, he would like to go to Cape Cod and just watch Daniel Jones' career unfold and enjoy it. And I think that that former GM is actually getting to do that at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I read an article last night, and I have no inside information. I can't tell you whether it's even true or not, and I don't know I'm not familiar with the person who wrote it, but this person claimed that during training camp, Dable set up a situation during training camp to basically make Jones not look good. What this article claimed was that when they were doing drills, when Jones was in the game, he would tell Wink what they were going to run so that Wink could throw a defense at Jones that was exactly what you needed to make the play not work. And then when Jones came out of the lineup and Tyrod went in, he would not tell Wink what the play was going to be so that Tyrod could have an easier time with the Giants defense. And he wanted to see how Jones would respond to the toughness. And if you remember back early in camp, again, whether this story is true or not, early in camp, Jones was having a terrible time getting the offense going against Wink's defense. But the claim of this article was that he wanted to see how Jones would respond to the adversity, and he loved what he saw, and that he claims that Dable loves Jones now and thinks he's really the guy for him. So whether that's true or not, everything Dable says, everything he seems to indicate, and what he does for Jones and does with Jones in the game, seems to indicate that he really is sold on him, and that the Giants are gonna really try to make a big push to keep him in New York.
Well, it's interesting, Tony, because first of all, I've written a little bit about Brian Daboll and his obvious, I want to say, affection or admiration for Daniel Jones. And the way that Brian Daboll has a little bit of a tell. Okay. And Brian Daboll's tell for me is that when you ask him about a player, and I can remember asking him about players, undrafted free agents way back in the spring. I would throw a player's name out at him and I would almost laugh because Dable didn't even know who the player was. All right. You could tell. And as things have unfolded, you can tell a lot of times from his answers when you ask him about a specific player, many times he will give you a short, succinct, sort of perfunctory, this is, answer because he has to give you an answer. As things have unfolded with Daniel Jones, you catch Dable on a Tuesday or a Wednesday when he's a little bit more relaxed and you can talk and he'll talk for a while and you ask him about Daniel Jones and he will talk forever. He will go on and on and on about Daniel Jones. And to me, that is a huge Brian Dable tell of how he feels about Jones. He doesn't cut the conversation off. He will talk at length when he's asked a question about Jones. And in terms of the article that you mentioned, that was from Tyler Dunn at a subscription website called golongtd.com. And I was not familiar with the particular story that Tyler told about the blitzes and all of that. What I can tell you, since I was at a bunch of the training camp practices, is that Dable talked incessantly about process over results through training camp. And what Dable and Mike Kafka did on a continual basis with this offense was put the offense in disadvantageous positions. Day after day, it was, hey, let's practice third and long. Let's practice the third and long situations and let's turn Wink loose. I can remember John Feliciano just coming out of practices and being practically irate because Wink was throwing everything in the book at the offensive line, every blitz in the book. And he's like, we haven't discussed how to handle these twists and these blitz pickups. And he's throwing stuff at us that we'd see in the middle of the season. And so just from that perspective, and we kept asking Dable, the offense looks terrible. The offense looks terrible. And he's like, process over results. We're intentionally putting them in very difficult situations. We'll care about the results when we get to week one. And that has proven out. So I don't have information on the story that Tyler Dunn said, but with my own eyes, I can tell you that Dable did intentionally make things very, very difficult on Jones in that offensive line.
Mm-hmm. And he was hard on Jones even at the beginning of the season. I mean, we all remember the interception that Jones threw late in the game against Tennessee to Saquon in the end zone, and he lit into him on the sidelines after that play. And so Dable, obviously, as if you've watched him, has no problem yelling and getting right in the face of any of his players when they do something bad. So he's just a really interesting guy because he obviously has a temper. He doesn't show that to you members of the press when he's interviewed. He's all very calm and collected and very kind of clipped in most of his statements about things. But you watch him on the sideline, and he really gets into his players when they don't do what he wants. But at the same time, I think you can tell that he's very emotional about when he sees things that he likes, and very emotional about the players who do the things that he likes.
And I think that's a big part of why the players have bought into Dable. And I think we have to talk about Brian and what he's brought to the Giants. And a big part of what he's brought to this team, to me, is he makes it clear that he believes in his players. I don't think the Giants really had that under Joe Judge. And the other thing for me is that so many coaches give lip service to the idea that, well, the players are the most important thing. We have to build our scheme around the players. It's about the players, it's not the plays, all of those things. And for a lot of coaches, that's lip service. For me, with this coaching staff, with Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, Wink Martindale, it's not lip service. It's, we have a bunch of guys who are limited, and we have to figure out what they can do to be successful and let them do that. Not enough coaches do it that way. Too many coaches just, this is my system and this is what we're going to run. And if we don't, if the players we have can't do it, we're just going to throw them out and find new players next year.
Yeah.
And I think Brian Dable deserves so much credit for what the Giants have done this year. I think it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, you look yesterday on the other sideline, there's Gus Bradley running the Colts defense, and he's got that one defense, that cover three that he loves to run. And the Giants were fairly consistently beating that underneath yesterday, during the game, but he doesn't change. That's the type of offense that he runs. In Los Angeles, you've got Joe Lombardi running an offense that's much more run heavy than you'd expect when you have a guy like Justin Herbert at quarterback. And you wonder whether, with a different offensive coordinator who'd say, what does this guy do well? And Justin Herbert does a lot of things well. Could Justin Herbert have 1,000 more yards and Los Angeles have a couple more wins than they already do this season? So the idea of adapting what you do to your players' strengths, I mean, it seems to make so much sense, but there's actually less of that going on in the NFL, it seems, than there should be.
Absolutely, and it's a credit to the coaching staff, and I think it's a the fact that the Giants made the playoffs this year is also a credit to that front office, considering how much they've done to add talent to this team, on a shoestring budget, with no money to spend in free agency, with having to look every week at the salary cap and thinking, what can we do to massage this salary cap to get through the season and still, be able to operate. Just bringing in guys like Isaiah Hodgins and Fabian Moreau and Jason Pinnock and Nick McLeod and even, on the offensive side, Nick Van Etten, who's been helpful to the offense, and just the work that they've done to supplement a roster that admittedly wasn't playoff caliber at the start of the season and might still be one of the weaker rosters among all the teams in the playoffs. The work that they've done should not go unnoticed, I think.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that one of the places it does not go unnoticed is among the many NFL players who are going to be free agents in the off season. Obviously, when players become free agents, one of their motivations is getting as much money as they can. And there are some players who probably are just looking for the biggest contract they can get, and whoever will give it to them, that's what they do. But hopefully, there are other players out there who will consider taking something less than the highest amount of money that they can possibly get from any team and ask, where can I go that will suit me, that will make the best use of my talents, and that I'll be going into a successful situation, a situation that I'll enjoy, where I'll have success. And I think what you were saying earlier about Daniel Jones and what happens with him in the offseason, you hope that that's exactly the calculation he makes. I mean, Daniel Jones is a smart guy, and you would hope he'd recognize that his chances of succeeding anyplace else except with Daboll and Kafka are less, and that he'd say as long as we get what he doesn't consider to be an insulting offer, if they offer him 2 years at 15 mil per year at this point, I think he'll say, no, that's not going to cut it for me. But I think the number has to be in the 20s. But I don't think I could be wrong, but I don't think he's the type of guy who will turn down what seems to be a representative offer in order to stay with the team. And then when you look at the rest of the cap space that the Giants have, and what Shane might do to bring in some free agents next year, you hope there are other guys out there who are saying, well, I'll take a couple mil per year less to sign with the Giants and be part of that, what's going on with that team, than to go somewhere else where I might have the money, but I might not like the situation. I mean, Russell Wilson is finding out that the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. He's getting a ton of money, so he'll be happy. He'll be happy with that. But obviously, the year hasn't worked out for him the way it should. And I think that happens with several other free agents. They take the big money and then they find that things aren't that rosy. And you have to think about the team you're joining also. And to me, the Giants have to be a pretty attractive destination for free agents this coming off season.
I think so. And just to mention it, never in a million years, or let's say never in 4 years, have I thought that we would hear Daniel Jones chants and MVP chants for the quarterback. I never thought we would hear those, but I was happy to hear them, because as Brian Daboll said last night, Daniel Jones deserved those. He earned those last night. I was happy to hear them. And I think you're right. Just the atmosphere, the way the Giants are playing, the way that Brian Daboll and his staff are using people, it all should be attractive to free agents who are looking for up and coming places, for places where they're set up, maybe to have some success.
And I think the last couple of weeks in particular have been really important for that, because obviously the Giants kind of hit a wall in midseason this year. And part of it was just the way the schedule played out, that they were playing some better teams in the second half of the season than in the first half of the season. But part of it too, I think, is that teams start to kind of figure out what you're trying to do, and they design ways to attack what you do, and that they found that things that worked early on weren't working anymore, and it took them time then to adjust back against those things. But I think the game against Minnesota, which even though they lost, that was a real trading punches type of game, in which the Giants made a good showing for themselves against a good team, and now this game yesterday, where they finally do what good teams, the Giants actually looked like one of the better teams in the league yesterday, sort of,
Yes.
for the first time. It wasn't kind of smoke and mirrors, we'll be clever and we'll hang on and we'll beat you late in the fourth quarter. This was the first time they've dominated an opponent since I don't know when. And so that's the type of thing that I think makes a good impression on teams. Whatever happens next week, whatever happens in the playoffs, they now, I think, have established themselves as an up and coming team.
Tony, let's talk about playoffs, and let's talk about seedings and all of that. I believe at this point the Giants qualified for the playoffs. I believe it will be, obviously, once you get to the playoffs, you want to succeed. You don't want to be one and done. We've seen Giants teams in the past, obviously, who people didn't think were championship caliber teams win championships, and I'm not predicting that this year, but you're in, and once you're in, you never know what will happen. And it's really a twofold thing. I think the Giants are playing with house money the rest of the way. Whatever happens is all gravy on what has already been a spectacular season for the Giants. But it's a twofold thing. Did you ever think a few weeks ago that we would get to week 18, have the Giants already be in the playoffs, already be locked into the spot where they're going to be in the playoffs, and have this game mean more to the Eagles than it means to the
Right,
Giants?
right.
I never thought I'd see that scenario.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago, we were all talking about the idea that wow, if the Giants need that Week 18 game, probably the Eagles will have clinched by then, and the Eagles may sit down all their starters, the way Doug Peterson did a couple
Now
years ago.
it's the Giants. Now it's the Giants who have the "do we
Yeah,
rest some guys"
and it
question
and
sitting in front of them.
it's a really interesting question, and actually, I was hoping to write something about that this week, but Dable said something yesterday after the game that I just found. I don't remember exactly what the question to him was, but he said something to the effect of, our goal was never just to make the playoffs."
Exactly. A goal was never just to make the
Yeah,
playoffs, but that still doesn't answer the question
yeah,
of whether he'll rest starters. And he basically, I'm looking, I'm trying to find his comment about that in the transcript last night, and he said his initial thought was that he would not rest players. He said you get rest after the season, um, and but I still think, and the Tom Coughlin approach is what everybody loves. Back when when the Giants stood toe to toe and tried to end the Patriots' unbeaten regular season, came really close. Coughlin, of course, getting plaudits from John Madden and from everyone around the NFL for the effort that the Giants gave in the final week of the season, and that proved to be a springboard for that team. This team's different. This team, it's not necessarily the same, and I wouldn't blame the Giants if they go into Philly and try to win that game and try to play all their starters and go and try to go toe to toe and make up for that beating that the Eagles gave them the other day. But the flip side of that is I don't want to see Daniel Jones lowering his shoulder and taking any hits next week.
yeah.
I would love to see Dexter Lawrence get a little bit of rest. I don't want to see Leonard Williams play. I don't want to see I want to see Aziz Ojulari play, but I don't need to see him play 60 snaps. I I would like personally for them to go in there with the idea of let's play guys, let's see how it goes, let's assess the game as it goes along, and let's be smart about it.
Yeah, I think that would be a great approach. Go out there and I'm sure. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of the players would like another crack at the Eagles, and
Absolutely.
they're embarrassed by what happened to them the first time they played, and I'm sure. I mean, of course, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Unfortunately, the what happens if they knock off the Eagles is that maybe Dallas becomes the number one seed, I think, and or at least win. Maybe not the one seed. I don't know, but at least they win. They win the division, I guess, if they win their game and
Yeah, it's weird because
it's like, well, do you actually want to make Dallas the division champion or not? Which team do you hate more, the Eagles or the Cowboys? And
yeah, but
that's kind of a tough one to answer.
it's so weird to me that the Giants could beat the Eagles and knock the mighty Eagles, who a few weeks ago people were talking about them going unbeaten,
Mhm,
and the Eagles could wind up as the 5 seed,
mhm, mhm.
which is just crazy.
Yep.
But yeah, I think there's like you said, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't with how you play guys. But I think for me, just be smart. If you want to play Daniel Jones, if you want to play Saquon Barkley, go ahead and do that. Probably be good for them to get at least some playing time. But if you also look at it and you say, okay, we're not going to win the game, or they've gotten some good work for a couple of series and you want to get them out of there, I'm good with that too.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I could imagine him approaching it the way most of us, I think, that you should approach preseason games. I mean, right, Joe Judge became infamous for not playing his starters, and then we felt that his starters weren't ready when the real season began because he sat them so much. And I think most people feel, well, you do have to have the starters in there a little bit and get them used to game conditions. And so I could see, let's say, especially in the first half, playing the starters and then going with mostly reserves in the second half. As you say, depending on game situation too, and it's one of those maybe calls that you make on the fly as you see how the game is going. On the flip side of things, just as as kind of a personal a pet peeve of mine, the Giants have Davis Webb on the roster, and he seems like such a good guy, and I feel like he never got a fair shot with the Giants the first time around, and then he's been a good soldier for Brian Dable those years at Buffalo, and then coming to the Giants. And the poor guy has never thrown a pass in an NFL game in his life. And what I'm saying to myself is I hope that sometime next Sunday that Davis Webb is active and that they put him in the game and just have him run a couple of series where he does more than just hand the ball off, where he actually tries to throw a couple of passes just so he has something in his stat line for his career in the NFL as a quarterback, And so I hope he does that at the end of the game.
Yeah, I would agree. And Tony, I think that's a good place for us to end on a very good playoff Monday edition of the podcast. Giants fans, please subscribe, like, share. If you're watching us on YouTube, and subscribe wherever you're listening to Big Blue View Radio as well. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.